Right, hi everyone. We're going to carry on with The Witches of Once by Cressida Cowell. We left Tsar in the Bad Woods and they thought that they were being attacked and they hadn't noticed that the feather was glowing. Right, so we're going to find out what's going to happen in chapter 4. The witch trap catches something. From Tsar's point of view, here is what happened. Tsar was waiting, hiding behind the tree, trembling with excitement. The sprites hummed louder and louder, whirling round his head, screeching, "Witches, witches, witches, witches!" Tsar heard the sound of hoofbeats, and something galloped into the moonlit clearing, too fast to stop. Something that, if Tsar could have seen it properly, had the legs of a pony below, and human bodies in the middle, and a great indistinct cloud above it. What strange monster was this? Rush was frozen with terror. He could not move. He would be run down. Screech! There was a tearing noise, as if the atmosphere was being ripped apart like paper. And then Tsar's senses were assaulted all at once by the worst smell you could possibly imagine. Rotting corpse and mouldy eggs, and dead man 6 weeks gone with unwashed feet and underarm reek. While a splintering scream like the death agony of 500 foxes buried itself in Tsar's brain and reverberated inside his head till he felt like he might go crazy. What is going on? Thought Tsar, with a tiny part of his mind that could still think. Rush curled up like a little hedgehog, rather pathetically putting his hands over his head as if it would protect him from whatever horror was making that noise and that smell. Tsar yelled up to Crusher, and then everything happened all at once. The cloud or wind howled louder. Who knew what it was? Maybe Tsar was right, and it really was a witch. But whatever it was, it screamed downwards. And at exactly the same time, 7 of the sprites whacked their spells with their wands, sending the spells whipping towards the centre of the clearing, with white-hot heat like speeding fireflies, and Crusher hauled like crazy on the net, and there was a gigantic explosion. Bang! Tsar threw himself flat on his stomach behind the tree to get out of the way. There was a great screeching noise. Something was ricocheting around the clearing, something unusually huge and dark and feathery, and then exiting with a dreadful piercing wail. Clouds of black and green smoke filled the glade, and Tsar got to his feet, coughing. Hanging in the centre of the clearing was his dangling witch trap, Crusher holding on to the other end for dear life. Something was struggling wildly inside, and all around the net was a force field of air, red as blood, red as fiery flame. What on earth just happened? Thought Rush, coughing and choking with the remnants of that smell, and thanking his lucky stars that he was still alive. It worked, gasped Tsar, staggering to his feet, unable to believe his luck. Oh my goodness, it worked! We've done it! We've really caught a witch! That's its force field! Stop attacking it, sprites! It's pointless! Sure enough, the sprite spells, shooting out sparks, were trying to push their way through the bright red air. But the air turned redder still, and spiky like living, breathing, flaming thorns. Rush looked at the struggling net and gulped, open-mouthed. Oh, by mistletoe and all things ivy, maybe Tsar really has done it. Maybe he's caught a witch. Let's get out of here. Rush scrambled to his feet, jumped on the back of his snowcat and ran away, as did Heliotrop and Darkish. They assumed that Tsar was going to follow them. But Tsar was about the only boy in the entire world who really was mad enough to stay in a clearing with an actual live witch. You's brilliant. You's marvellous. You's the best leader in the world. What's do we's do now, boss? Asked Squeeze Shoes nervously. Even Tsar was now terrified, but he would rather die than admit this to his sprites and his animals. Surround the witch, ordered Tsar. Complaining loudly, the sprites nonetheless surrounded the net in a burning circle, and Tsar forced himself to put one foot in front of the other and approach the net. his hands so sweaty with fear he nearly dropped to the very small saucepan. The smell in the clearing was so chokingly bad, it was like swimming through a disgusting sulphurous soup. Tsar stood underneath the net, staring up at it slowly swinging above them, back and forth, back and forth. Rather unexpectedly, the 4 distinctive legs of a horse were dangling down from the holes in the net. Wow, breathed Tsar. Who would have thought it? Witches aren't like birds, they're more like centaurs. Okay, witch, shouted Tsar, trying to make his voice sound scary and waving the saucepan threateningly in one trembling hand. Don't try anything stupid. We have you completely surrounded and I am armed with a weapon made of iron. There was a short silence and then a small, shaky voice from inside the net said, I'm not a witch. Witches are extinct. Everyone knows that. Why are you attacking us? What do you want? Well, of course a witch isn't going to admit it's a witch, is it? Said Tsar. Don't you try and trick me, witch. I'm not trying to trick you, said the voice, less shaky now and more indignant. My name is Wish, not Witch. Even if witches did exist, they're supposed to be green, aren't they? With acid blood and feathers and everything? There was another pause. Well, what kind of monster are you then? Demanded Tsar. Are you some kind of centaur? No, said the voice. That's just my pony. I think he may have fainted. Me and my friend Bodkin were going through the forest and something suddenly started chasing us. Let us go! Botheration. It wasn't a witch after all. It had all been for nothing. His horrible, superior older brother had been right all along, and the entire evening had been a waste of time. Let whatever it is down, Crusher, sighed Tsar, flattened by pulverising disappointment. Slowly, Crusher let down the net. The pony had not fainted, poor thing. It had been hit by one of Tiffinstorm's sleep-inducing curses, and it lay on the ground, snoring loudly. But Tsar saw that there were humans in the net too. A small human, dressed head to toe in armour, who scrambled up from the snoring pony and stepped out of the net, waving a large ornamental sword, and behind the teeny little human, a slightly larger human, skinny as a rake and also encased entirely in armour, who was stumbling to his feet as if he was just waking up. We know that these 2 humans were Wish and Bodkin. Bodkin was the taller one and Wish was the little one with the sword. But Tsar had never met a warrior before, and he could never imagine that Wish and Bodkin might be heroes of this story, just like he was himself. All Tsar saw that these were 2 humans wearing iron breastplates and carrying iron swords, which meant they must be warriors. And Tsar had been brought up to hate the warriors like poison, because they were the enemy. Excellent. After lurching this way and that from fear to excitement to disappointment, Tsar was spoiling for a nice straightforward fight. If he couldn't catch a witch, at least he could kill an enemy. Warriors! Cried Tsar fiercely, narrowing his gaze, getting a good grip on his saucepan, and he drew a heavy oak staff from his rucksack. Warriors! 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 Hissed the sprites, burning red with anger. Kill them! Kill them! Kill them! It's a wizard and its creatures! Cried Bodkin in alarm, pointing at Tsar and leaping protectively in front of Wish. And they look aggressive. They certainly did, and Wish stared around, petrified, at the burning sprites, on fire with fury, flames licking off their long limbs, sparks spitting all over the place, the growling wolves, bears and snowcats showing their teeth, and way, way above them, the gigantic figure of the giant in the background. They were hopelessly outnumbered, and giants were supposed to eat people. Sprites could magic you into a slow death, and one look at those snowcats told you that they could tear you to pieces. Wish had an enchanted sword but she knew she wasn't a very good sword fighter, and let's face it, Bodkin hadn't been much help as a bodyguard so far. They didn't have a chance. "Don't worry, Princess," shouted Bodkin bravely. "I'll deal with them." Bodkin drew his sword and shook it. He advanced in a menacing manner. He caught sight of the giant. He stopped dead in his furiously warlike pose. He blinked twice, and then his eyes closed. His head flopped forward, and he slowly toppled over like a falling tree, accidentally chopping his spear in half with his sword as he fell. And he lay there with his mouth open. Tsar looked down at the fallen Bodkin in astonishment. Was this a trick? "Snowcats, wolves, cover me," ordered Tsar. Their fur bristling, the animals circled round Tsar, ready to pounce. "Bear, cover the guy on the ground. He may be faking." The bear put a big bear paw on Bodkin's chest and sat on him. "Sprites, leave this to me. I'll show these wicked warriors that we wizards know how to fight," cried Tsar, and he launched himself at Wish, saucepan in one hand, staff in the other. Wish parried Tsar's thrust with the enchanted sword, and the fight began. Wish found that fighting with an enchanted sword made things a lot easier than fighting with a normal sword. The enchanted sword could anticipate where the next saucepan thrust or lunge from Tsar's staff was coming from, and throw itself in the way of that attack, dragging Wish with it. The sword jerked her this way and that, with Wish gripping onto it with both hands, for all the world as if she was hanging on to the tail of a wild bull. Caliburn was in a frenzy of worry, and he flapped about the fighters' heads, squeaking, "The enchanted sword! Be really careful with that enchanted sword! Don't let it touch you! There's something wrong with it!" "An enchanted sword?" breathed Tsar. "Impossible! How could a warrior be fighting with an enchanted sword? Warriors didn't use magic." The enchanted sword made a sweeping lunge forward, and this thrust finally disarmed Tsar. His staff went spinning into the undergrowth, followed by the saucepan. "Do you surrender?" said Wish, holding the enchanted sword above Tsar's head. "I surrender," said Tsar from between gritted teeth. "Don't trust him. Wizards are tricksters," shouted Bodkin, who had woken up from his faint but was still trapped beneath the bear. Wish ignored this instruction and instead relaxed, stepped back and lowered the sword. Which was a mistake. Bodkin was right. Tsar was not to be trusted. "King Cat, Night Eye, attack!" shouted Tsar as soon as the sword was lowered. King Cat leaped in and smashed Wish down to the ground. The force of the blow knocked the enchanted sword out of Wish's hand, and as soon as it left her grip, the enchantment left. The sword went dead and fell to the forest floor, as cold and lifeless as a normal sword. Tsar picked it up, and 60 stone of powder blue giant lynx in the form of King Cat leaned on Wish's chest and cracked open her helmet with its jaws, like a nutcracker cracking a nut. The two halves of the helmet fell away, and Tsar was looking straight into the face of an odd-looking little girl with a patch over one eye. "It's a girl," said Tsar in surprise. The sprites laughed uproariously at this. Tsar was beaten by a girl. Wish was looking straight into the face of a snarling snowcat and a wizard boy who was holding the enchanted sword over her head in a purposeful fashion. "And now," said the wizard boy, "do you surrender?" All right, so Wish has got herself into a bit of a pickle here. I wonder what's going to happen next. Join me tomorrow and we'll find out in chapter 5. Bye.